Before I begin this video, I want to preface it by saying that I am presenting all of this information to you from a perspective that is solely based on my first-hand experience. I highly recommend trying the game out for yourself in an ideal environment if possible, and forming your own conclusion. In my opinion, fear is subjective, and what one may find scary or fear-inducing, another may not at all. Or they may even laugh and shrug it off as a pandering attempt at being a horror trope. Now, this is no fault of anyone, but rather it is based on the precedent of what I said before. Fear is subjective. Over the years, Frictional Games has garnered the reputation of somewhat of a horror game titan. This is saying a lot, as they started in 2006 as a very small indie dev studio based out of Helsingborg, Sweden. Founders Thomas Grip and Jens Nilsson spearheaded the company with minimal professional experience under their belt, a feat that becomes even more impressive in retrospect considering what the company has become today. Sparing some of the details in between, they began their journey towards success with the ever-popular Penumbra series. First with Overture in 2007, followed by Black Plague in 2008, and then finally rounded out with the overlooked Requiem later that year, which really is just a puzzle-centric expansion of the Black Plague title. Both Overture and Black Plague were met with overwhelmingly positive feedback, with a lot of traction being built on the originality and unique nature the games offered. This alone gave the small team a boost in popularity and reputation, something which only grows with their subsequent release in 2010 titled Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Initially expected to be a flop upon its release, it was met with very positive responses and a quickly growing popularity among players and critics alike. Picking up this increase in a cult following, YouTube playthroughs skyrocketed the title into the stratosphere, with Amnesia: The Dark Descent now forever ingrained as a true staple for horror enthusiasts and players alike. Following the massive outpouring of support and love for their new release, the team felt a lot of pressure looming over their heads for what the next release would be. They feared another Amnesia game would disappoint or fall short when compared to their previous effort. This was mostly due to their confusion on where to continue the story of the series. So in response to this, they outsourced and gave the task over to the Chinese Room, known for their products such as Dear Esther and Everybody's Gone to Rapture. The resulting product was 2013's Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs, which is its own can of worms, so I won't get into that today. Maybe another time. While A Machine for Pigs was in development by the Chinese Room, Frictional Games decided to work on their own project, something new. They decided it would be best to take a break from the Amnesia series, in efforts to keep it fresh and keep it lively. So they decided that 2 years later, after releasing A Machine for Pigs, they would release a game titled Soma. Soma still took from the same formula that had been used in previous titles, being no defense, run and hide, and a winding story riddled with psychological scare factors that get in your head more than they make you jump out of your chair. But this formula had set the bar for Frictional Games' quality and releases, and everyone was okay with that, because it felt real. It was a real formula that worked. It made the player feel responsible for the character's life, which, in essence, represented the life of the player. Despite Soma getting its well-deserved time in the spotlight, and being praised for its incredible narrative and philosophical story that left many players, including myself, feeling paranoid and genuinely reflecting on their lives, the formula was getting old. And even though it worked, it was starting to show its flaws and its repetition. Frictional thought it was probably time for a shift in direction in both narrative and gameplay. All of that lead up to finally get to the point of this video. Was it long-winded? Yes. But necessary? Absolutely. Context for the brief analysis I will provide is absolutely needed in order to fully understand the points that I make forward. Okay. Enough putting it off. Time to get to the main draw of this video. Amnesia Rebirth is the newest title from Frictional Games. With development having began around the launch of Soma, the game was eventually released 5 years later. The game is a somewhat direct sequel to The Dark Descent with many of the same characters mentioned, although it takes place approximately 98 years after the original. Admittedly an odd choice, but the game had been teased since the summer of 2020, and it seemed to provide a promising premise, setting, and gameplay. The game states to take place in the deserts of Algeria, which is notably a minor plot location mentioned occasionally in the original Dark Descent. You play as Anastasie Trianon, or Tassie, a 27-year-old French drafting technician for the Triple Crown Mining Company. She and 14 other passengers, one being her husband Salim, were aboard a plane called the Cassandra, which crashed in the barren desert of Algeria after an engine malfunction. Now, before I get any further, I do not wish to give too much away beyond the basic premise, as I highly recommend looking into the game for yourself to not have it spoiled by me. I'm simply here to share my thoughts and opinions on a game in a series that I hold very close to my heart. And I do not intend to spoil anything by explaining my thoughts, and will do my best not to. Where to start? Well, in comparison to the original, the gameplay is very much the same. Physics, puzzles, the movement, the no combat. Not much has changed from that besides maybe some more polish, which is never a bad thing. I immediately knew I was playing a Frictional Games product when I picked up my first vase in the game and smashed it against another. Classic. To start with the things I do like, I like how they kept a lot of the format the same, and tried to keep a lot of the original player base familiar with the controls and mechanics of the game. Almost every obstacle you encounter is a physics-based puzzle, which I am a massive fanboy over. I do like the atmosphere of the desert, and how the setting of Algeria ties back to the original game, and even goes as far to bring back some of the old characters, though through name and mention only. But it still gave me a good smile. The game is beautiful, and it runs remarkably smooth for how gorgeous the scenery is. The sound design in this title is on point as always with Frictional. Not missing anything here. Oh, and the inventory is back, where it was absent in the aforementioned Machine for Pigs. So that alone is a very good thing in mine and many other players' eyes. So far they've hit every mark with matching what they have done before. And if you're wondering why I'm saying all the positives I have for this game, like a list instead of elaborating more, well, that's because most of it, if not all of what they changed or did differently in this game, is a step backwards. They tried to change it up, but they fell short. Anything they lived up to or exceeded the bar with, they brought back down with a dull or outright stupid mechanic that makes you feel like you're out of touch with any Amnesia vibe you had from the start. For starters, right off the bat, you can essentially kiss the Algerian setting goodbye. You really are only in it a handful of times throughout the entire game. This would be less of a problem if the game wasn't heavily sold on the fact that Algerian dunes and ruins were the main setting. And don't get me wrong, they did a damn good job selling the setting. I just wish we got to see more of it. Next, the enemy encounters are not anything like previous games. They are fairly scarce, and when they happen, the enemies are almost too smart. Whereas they may have been seen as dumbed down in previous games, they almost seem to have the xenomorph dual AI as an alien isolation, where one AI has no idea where you are, and the other knows exactly where you are at all times. More often than not, I was growing more and more frustrated with each encounter, rather than I was scared. I realized then that I was not playing Amnesia anymore. The fear or insanity mechanic is not exactly new, but they changed it drastically from what it was in the Dark Descent. Where in the Dark Descent, it was subtle, but accumulating when you were losing your sanity, and eventually you would pass out. Which, again, was subtle, but stressed the player out. In Rebirth, you immediately start losing sanity in darkness, and after being in it for more than a minute at a time, the ultimate no-no for frictional games happens. A jump scare. Every single time. Never in my living days would I think I would live to see frictional games pull such cheesy jump scare out of seemingly nowhere. Sure, it's been done before, even in the Dark Descent. But once. And it was a very cleverly placed jump scare, not a core functioning game mechanic. Yet again, I realized I was not playing Amnesia anymore. As if that were not bad enough, the game is flat out derivative. There were multiple parts throughout the game that I drew near exact comparisons to from Soma. And since the game is so new, I don't feel at liberty to spoil exactly what it was, so I'll leave it to a later date to make a video comparing similarities and copy-pastes. You can hold me to it. It'll happen. I promise. As a last specific problem I have, there's one section in the entire game that I could not get through without quote-unquote dying a dozen times. Let's just say it's a quote-unquote stay in the shadows mission to avoid spoilers. The enemies can just always find you no matter what, and it doesn't even matter because these monsters have a ranged attack that you have to quick-time event to resist. But the more you resist, the further off track you get, and you end up getting lost or dying soon after. Maybe this is just me having this issue, but I couldn't get through this part to save my life. And oh yeah, there's a quick time event mechanic now. As a closer to tie all the disappointments together into a tight package, the game drones on for far too long, often repeating the same trope multiple times just to get filler time in. You do a shit ton of work of X work to achieve Y goal, then right as it seems like you're okay and you did it, it's too good to be true and Z goes wrong. All in all, despite the things they did right, it is not an Amnesia game. Not in my eyes at least. And I hate to admit that my opinion is not unshared by many disappointed and let down players. While the game does have some pretty hefty strong points to it, I cannot find it in my heart to say that the good outweighs the bad. And it really saddens me that this is what we got after 5 years of waiting. Of the 2 projects they announced they were working on that 5 years ago, I almost wish they released the non-horror title first, and put some more thinking into this game. I want so desperately to like it, because it does a lot right. But I would be lying to myself if I said I liked the whole game. But I still love you, Frictional Games. And as a company, you've done too much good to say this game is a deal breaker for my respect and admiration you've gained over the years. That's all I have to say. Thank you for listening to me ramble and bicker. I love you all so very much. And this is not like my usual upload, but I've put a lot of work into this video, and I hope you stick around for more in the future. And I don't do this a lot, but don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified every Wednesday when I cook up another creation. Take care now.